visual novel UI design. Where we have about a minute and a half or so extra, but all right. Well, whenever you're ready, you can just start.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna share really quick. No. Cool. Okay, so is it cool to start?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Hey, everybody. Just here to talk today a little bit about UI design. Before we even jump into that, I just want to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Laura, or I also go by Sasquatchii online. I work full-time as a graphic designer at a web development agency, and I also like to create visual novels, and I also freelance doing UI design for visual novels. And I've also co-hosted a podcast called the Buzz Visual Novel Podcast, which is basically like a podcast where we talk about everything like related to creating visual novels and developing visual novels as well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And just to get started, I'd like to briefly go over what a user interface is. And I'm sure you guys have all heard of UI, user interface, but for those who don't know or aren't as familiar with it, I thought it'd be good to like briefly go over it. And to describe what it is, I'd like to use an analogy. So like, just let's pretend for a second that your visual novel is a car. And so if your visual novel's a car, then the inside of the car with like the dashboard, the steering wheel, the pedals, the controls, that would be your visual novel's UI. And basically like the user interface is just, it allows players to interact with your game through like menus, screens, and other like visual elements and graphics. And just the same way that a driver could control a car through like the dashboard and everything inside of the car. And so yeah, the next thing that I want to touch on is why UI design is so important. And if you're not a designer or a nerd like me, it's probably not something you've thought about a whole lot, but it's something I think about all the time. And I just like to revisit our car analogy for a quick second. But instead of a car, what if your visual novel was a go-kart instead? And I don't know if you guys can tell at first glance, but like this go-kart is insane. It has like toilets for like seats. It has a water cooler for like the backrests, and the steering wheel is just like this, it's another toilet seat. And I think if I had to guess, I think maybe somebody built this go-kart as like a joke or maybe for fun or just to see if they even could. So yeah, so like why am I talking about this? So what if somebody asked you to drive this go-kart? Like, how would you feel about that? Personally, I think I would be like a little unsure of like how to operate this go-kart. And I would not trust the steering wheel that like, it looks like it's just like stuck onto there. It doesn't look like it can really turn. And I would also just feel super silly like riding around in something like I would probably feel like really embarrassed. So when you compare the design of this go-kart to the inside of this car, like this, you know, this car is very like well designed. It's like sleek and elegant. And I think a lot more people would be like people like me would be more comfortable and like more at ease, like sitting in this car and driving this around. Like I would also feel safer. But even though I would be worried about driving this go-kart, there are probably a lot of people out there who would love to drive something like this around. And even though I look at it and I see nothing but like danger and like terror and horror, there are others out there who would think it would be like a really unique and fun experience. So like my point is, like by showing you these two extreme examples of like a car design versus like a go-kart design, is that design is actually a very powerful tool, and it can shape our experiences and how we perceive things. And it's also really important to consider the people we're designing for. And I promise you guys, if you keep these two things in mind, you will be able to create an experience that the players and the people who play your game will really enjoy. So yeah, next thing I want to touch on is like who can make a user interface and like who like is able to create UI. And the answer is anybody can design and create a UI. You don't have to be a designer. You don't need to be qualified or take classes. And I think all you really need is time, patience, and a little bit of persistence in order to be able to create a UI. And I would also like to mention really quick that if you're short on time and you want something that's really high quality and professional, then you might want to consider hiring a designer to create the UI for your game instead. So yeah, once you've decided to get started on the UI, I think there are some easy steps you can follow that would be helpful to you. But since there's no right or wrong way to go about the design process, I'd actually like to walk you through what I would normally do. And you don't have to follow these exact steps. And what works for me might not necessarily work for you. So I would actually encourage you guys to experiment and try to find a process of your own that best helps you. And the first thing I would encourage you to do is research and just like think about like what kind of games have come before yours that are similar or maybe like the same genre. And you can look at those games and see how they're handling their UI design. And it's also just really helpful to know what's already been done and to be aware of it so you can make informed decisions moving forward. Like maybe you want to try to do something similar, or you might want to try to like break the mold and do something completely different. And another way to do research is to get offline, go visit a library or bookstore. There's a ton of information on UI design, game design, and books. And books are also really like awesome just in general, and they can be really hugely helpful. So yeah, once I've done research, I like to like look around for inspiration. And as I mentioned before, you can look at the UI and other visual novels and try to get some ideas for what you might like. And like, it's good to see like, what do you think is working? Maybe it's like a color palette or the layout of a certain screen or the textures used. So yeah, there's that. And for more inspiration, I would actually encourage you guys to move away from games and explore other mediums such as music, movies, books, and like, again, go outside. I saw somebody echoing that in chat. But yeah, the outside world is great, and just getting out there and experiencing life. Yeah, it's like inspiration comes from like so many different places. And I think it's just really important to keep exploring and being open to different experiences that might inspire you. So yeah, and another thing you can do to collect inspiration is create a mood board, which is basically just like a visual representation of things that inspire you. And that could include like color palettes, textures, photographs, and even like physical objects if you're creating a physical mood board. And you can also create a digital mood board as well. And Pinterest is a really good tool if you want to create something digital. I've used it a lot for my designs, and it's really great to be able to quickly find things to pull inspiration from. So yeah, once you've done that, I normally like to get started with sketches. And I've noticed a lot at my day job when I'm working with people on my team, I notice they'll sometimes have an idea that they want to sketch out, but they'll sometimes even feel like sheepish or embarrassed about their sketching ability, which is like crazy because like, I don't think you have to be an artist or have like really good drawing ability to be able to create a great sketch. And actually sometimes simple and rough is even better because it allows you to quickly and easily like create multiple layouts and variations and just explore new ideas without having to be like so worried about like, is this perfect and does this look beautiful? So yeah, here are a couple of sketches I've created just for different screens and menus. And then to show you guys, these are some that are like my more rough sketches. The bottom left one was for a main menu where I was like, okay, here's the circle, that's gonna be the logo, buttons underneath, and background art. And the top right one was just like a scribble to like show full-size images for like a CG gallery. So yeah, they're not pretty to look at, but like we were able to like get on the same page about like how we wanted the pages to be laid out. So yeah. So once I finish sketching, I like to think about how the UI will look and feel. And I think it's really important to consider like the theme, the tone, and how everything's gonna look, and like how's that gonna reflect like what your game is. And like, for example, if you're creating like a horror game, then it could be cool to have like a UI reflect that mood. And you might want to create something like dark, shadowy, and mysterious. But if you're creating more like a romance game or like a comedy, your UI might be like light, airy, and cute instead. So it's really all about what you want to achieve. And I think it's really helps to connect your UI to sort of a mood or a theme or a tone. And one thing I do is I create what I call UI kits, which is basically like a visual that includes an assortment of graphic elements such as buttons, fonts, sliders, all sorts of cool things. And I have some to show you guys. This is a UI kit I created for a game jam with a team of people. The game is like, it's kind of like an Otomi romance game, and it focuses on, it takes place in the North Pole. It has like it's called an otaku's guide to Santa's reindeer, and we knew that this game was probably going to be mostly for like women, and we wanted to create something that was like feminine and cheerful and cute. So we used really like white backgrounds, and there's also a lot of snow and the scenery, and we there's actually like a part in the game where the character finds like a magical snowflake. So we took like a snowflake design motif and incorporated that kind of in there subtle as well. And we just tried to think about like ways to just like make it feel nice and like fun. So yeah. And this UI kit was for another game I created. This is for like a darker type of game, but it's still like really fun and a little bit like comedic. But in that game, like we knew we wanted to create something really dark, so we used like dark grays and blacks, and also red was kind of like as a color like complement, I guess. And there's also in the story of the game, they deal in spider silk, and so that was one thing we wanted to incorporate into the UI, and we used like cobwebs and like spider silky like elements as well throughout, just as like a nice little touch to complement. So yeah. Once I've done all that, the next part in my process is usually I get started designing. And I think if you've done all the legwork before you get to the step, like doing your research, looking for inspiration, doing sketches, or just kind of sorting out how you want your aesthetic to be, then you'll usually have all the right tools. And like, I think everything, for me at least, seems to sort of fall into place. And I think, you know, you'll have a direction that you know you're going to go into. And I don't want to go into too much detail on like actually designing, because everyone's process is different. And a lot of the times, like design is just play. I have a lot of fun like playing with different elements and graphics on the screen. And like when you start out, a lot of the time, like my designs when I get started look like crap, and then you refine, and it really helps to collaborate with people as well, because like I'll send them something like, and then they'll get back to me and they'll have feedback, and like, you know, sometimes like, oh yeah, like they had some really good feedback there, so I'll go back and like I'll like rework the design a little bit, and we'll just keep making it better. So it's kind of an iterative process, and it's a lot of the time also a collaborative process if you're working on teams as well. So yeah, I thought it would be really cool for this part just to include some examples of screens and menus that are commonly used in visual novels. And also some of my examples are a little bit unique in the sense that they don't normally follow the norm of what is seen in like a lot of visual novels, but I wanted to include them to show you guys because I think they're all great games with really strong UI design. And the first one, oh yeah, title slide. The first one that I had was the Life is Strange, like start menus and like just sort of the main menus. I think you see that a lot in any type of game, but visual novels like tend to do some really cool things with theirs. This was, I also, text boxes are a really big part of visual novels. And this is from a game called The Shadows That Run Alongside Our Car. And I love what they did with the text boxes here, because like a lot of visual novels, you have the text box like at the bottom, like stuck to the bottom of the screen. And like a lot of the times, like it kind of obscures some of the background art, but here the text box like moves around and shifts depending on like who's talking or if somebody is thinking. And I think it was just a really cool and creative way to handle the text box. Another thing is choice boxes where the players will need to make a decision. This is from Analog A Hate Story, and I just thought it was a really different, normally they're more boxy and rectangular, but I thought this was a really cool way, especially too, because in the story of the game, you're on a computer, and this is like the interface of the computer, so I thought that was really cool. You've got settings, give players the access to sort of change like volume, text speed, etc. There's also the yes, no screen, or the are you sure you want to save, load, or quit screens. And then yeah, save and load screens as well. There's also, I've seen more and more visual novels like include history screens where you can like scroll back and see what's been said in case you missed something, which I think is really great to have. And then I'm seeing a lot of more visual novels use help screens as well. And I think this is awesome, especially if it's somebody's first time playing a visual novel and they might not be sure about like the standards for what you can and can't do. So I love having this in there. If you can, I would recommend doing a help screen like this. Another thing that I've started seeing a lot, which I'm really excited about, is people have been including like a credit screen or about screens in their game, where it's like actually a menu within the game that you can click on. And you can like see like, okay, here's the artists that worked on this, and here's who did the music and the writing and the coding and all of that cool stuff. So I think it's a really, really great. And there's also the roll credit screens at the end of games as well. But I love having that in there for people to access at all times. Because I've noticed too, sometimes I'll play other games and they don't have this sort of a screen, and I'll be like, I wonder who did the art, or oh, the music is so good for this. And it's kind of it. For me personally, I just think it's just a really nice touch and a really like great way to like give a nod to the people who worked on the game. So yeah. There's also like CG screens, gallery screens, and this is a way to let players see like backgrounds, art, or maybe it's like music boxes where they can play music. This is from the letter VN. I thought they did a really great job of like letting people like look through the art, and they have like so much like cool stuff that you can go to, like they have backgrounds, CGs, and the way they sorted it out by like each thing was, I thought, a really nice touch. And some visual novels, depending on like the type of game that it is, I've noticed that sometimes there's like relationship screens, which is like down at the bottom here with the hearts. And then sometimes they'll also do like stats if it's like a stats building type of game. And then, yeah, I've also seen in a lot of games, there's, depending on like what it is, here's another part with the stats. And then they've also got like scheduling if it's like a planner type of like game thing as well. So yeah, that's another thing that I see a lot, which I think is really cool. So yeah, once you've designed everything, I would strongly recommend having somebody play test your games. And if you can sit in a room with somebody and watch them as they play test through your game and see how they interact with the UI, especially if it's a little bit more complex or different than like a standard visual novel, I would strongly recommend doing that. And it doesn't have to be anything. You could ask your friends, your mom, or I mean, you could even just ask like friendly internet strangers. And you know, like people on the Lemasaw forums, you could ask like people on Twitter, just all sorts of forums out there and places where people will like play your game for free and just like to help you out. Or you could pay them. I would, if you can pay them and you're serious, I would recommend paying people to do this as well, to get really good feedback. So yeah, I think that's it. And you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, if you want to get in contact with me, talk about games, UI, whatever, I welcome that. So yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Awesome. Got excited hearing about UX testing because at my day job, that's also a giant thing too.
Do you guys do play testing for your games? Is that what you said?
Well, at my day job, like, which is a tech company, yeah, we UX test all the site changes. And it's such an informative thing, right? Like to see someone get physically, like see them get confused at a thing when you ask them, can you do this task? And they can't do it. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, I work at a web design place and we create websites and like user testing. We actually use a site called usertesting.com, and people get paid to like go on a website and they take video of, and they like talk out loud about like where, you know, how they think they're supposed to go through and interact with things. And like, we pay a lot of money because that's valuable information and it's going to make whatever you're creating so much stronger. So yeah.
Seriously, it's something everyone should try. Especially when
definitely.
They're doing interface work, definitely.
Yes, oh, so important. You don't want to confuse people and you don't want to piss people off, because if somebody is like confused or mad, they might not want to play your game. Or if they can't figure out something, like you might just really frustrate them. So yeah.
Yeah, because it's always a thing where you know where things are supposed to be, so you have an expectation of how people are going to use it, and then you put it in front of a real user, like grandma, they're not thinking the same way.
Yeah, your mom's just like, oh no, like what am I supposed to do here? I don't know.
If I press this round button thing, it's gonna break, and they don't click it when you're supposed to click it, right? Like everyone's seen that.
Yeah, I actually had an example. So I didn't want to include it because I thought like there was no way I was going to be able to finish all this in 15 minutes, but I created a game for a game jam called A Day in the Life of a Slice of Bread, where I got rid of all of the user interface in the game, and it was just art and text over everything. And later on, like the game got kind of popular with streamers, and it was free, and like itch.io like they recommended it to a lot of people, and because it's a funny game, a lot of like Twitch streamers made videos of themselves playing it, so I was able to like watch them like play through my game, which was really awesome. But I noticed people getting confused because they didn't know there was a menu. Like you had to right click or escape to pull up the menu, and like I could just tell like people weren't like, there was a person who wanted to save their game but they couldn't, so like to replay through it they had to like skip through like all these like minutes of dialogue, and I was like, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. But yeah, I mean, hindsight's 2020. But yeah, thanks for listening to me ramble.
All right. Okay, Tristan, I'm going to pass over presenter mode to you because
oh god,
I know you're gonna have to follow up this talk, man.
I know, right? It's such a tough act to follow.
Yeah, but it was awesome. And yeah, we'll continue questions and stuff during chat because we're all running out of time.
All right.